Discovering an abandoned Chinese bride transformed my life in 30 days, an inspiring love story. Jake sat alone in his dimly lit office, the weight of blueprints pressing on his mind. Each line on the paper reminded him of late nights spent chasing unyielding deadlines and falling short of his dream. The small Texas town buzzed outside, but inside, he felt invisible, a ghost trapped in a life dictated by others. He craved connection, yet the demands of his architectural firm made it hard to breathe. As he stared at the rain streaking the window, he recalled his grandmother's words about loyalty and love. Those simple yet powerful notions had guided him, but now they felt like shackles, constraining him from reaching out to the world. At 38, Jake wanted to be more than the dutiful architect or the reliable son. He wanted his existence to matter. But with every passing hour, doubts crept in like shadows. Was his hard work enough? Did success in a stale career define a life well lived? On nights like this, he wondered if he'd made the right choices, questioned if he was destined to fade away in anonymity. As the rain poured, Jake arrived at the community shelter and prepared for another long evening of service. He had always believed in giving back, but somewhere inside he felt cynical. Did he really want to be here, or was he just buying time to escape the bleakness of his own life? That thought gnawed at him. He looked at the faces around him, lost in their own struggles, and wondered if anyone felt as trapped as he did. Then, amidst the noise and gloom, he met May. Her shock of jet-black hair draped over slender shoulders, eyes brimming with unshed tears. She was a young immigrant, left behind by her fiancé with little more than a suitcase and dreams that had fizzled like soap bubbles. Her heart was fragile, her spirit wounded. In an instant, Jake was pulled into her turmoil, a yearning igniting within him. He felt an inexplicable pull to help her navigate her pain, as if a forgotten part of him had awakened. Despite the chaos of his own existence, something deeper took hold. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every conversation with May chipped away at the walls Jake had built around himself. They shared fractured stories late into the night, and in their dialogue bloomed an intellectual romance. Their connection, though unlikely, blossomed under the oppressive weight of their respective pasts. Yet Jake felt the pressures of his corporate responsibilities looming large. The difficulty of thriving in an industry facing a tumultuous tide left him clamoring for stability. Simultaneously, May battled her cultural isolation and guilt. Each new aspiration met with the ghosts of her family's expectations. Just as they began to breathe life into new ambitions, a troubling phone call shattered the fragile equilibrium they had constructed. May's past tore at her courage, revealing a legacy of prejudice that threatened to suffocate her dreams. Jake's heart raced. He could feel his grandmother's shadow behind him, whispering tales of love and loyalty. Yet here was a moment that demanded he confront not only societal norms, but the deep-seated prejudices that had stained his own desires. As May stood before him, eyes filled with doubt, he was faced with a moral dilemma that pierced him to the core. Did love truly empower, or would that love invite judgment and scorn? Would he fight against the expectations of his peers, risking everything for her right to craft her own narrative in a world seemingly intent on pulling them apart? There was no clear answer, only the heavy thought that echoed in his mind. The moment unfolded, layering anguish upon anguish, each breath a reminder of uncertainty. Jake grappled with rising fears. What if he failed her? What if love was not enough? With every lingering doubt, the distance between them felt insurmountable. He stood on a precipice, peering into a future where he could either embrace transformation or lose everything. The rain outside continued to drown the streets, mirroring the tempest brewing within. Jake's heart thundered in his chest, a chaotic symphony of fear and desire. The weight of his choices pressed heavily upon him, and for the first time in years, he felt the urge to confront the core of his identity, to dismantle the layers of expectation that had defined him. With May's pain echoing in his mind, he recognized that the greatest act of loyalty he could offer wasn't just standing by her, as vital as that was, but also to confront his own shadows. He wanted to be the beacon for her brightness, yet the flickering candle of his own aspirations had nearly died. Staring into May's eyes, he could clearly see her struggles reflected back. They mirrored his own. He ached to inspire her, as she had inadvertently inspired him, rekindling the hope buried deep under the rubble of his corporate existence. The architecture of his life had become rigid and unyielding, resembling the stark lines of the blueprints he meticulously sketched at work. Yet, here lay a chance to venture into uncharted emotional territories. "May," he began slowly as if tasting the words, "I can help you navigate this. But it means we both have to confront our truths. I have to change too." Her gaze softened, but uncertainty clouded her eyes. "You don't know what's at stake for me, Jake. My family back home wouldn't understand. They wouldn't accept us." The echoes of disapproval and family loyalty racked her voice with tension, and Jake felt the familiar weight of his grandmother's expectations on his shoulders. "You're right. But aren't we shaping our own paths? Shouldn't we chase dreams that feel genuine even if it scares us?" They were at a crossroads, and he sensed that taking this leap would redefine not only their relationship, but the very core of their identities. Stepping outside the protective shell of his routine felt like plunging into icy water. But deep inside, a flicker of determination ignited. That night, Jake returned home contemplating his architectural career. Would he quench his thirst for meaning by further burying himself in corporate redundancy? Or could he find a way to redesign not just buildings, but lives, the lives of those like May, and maybe even his own? The sounds of the night wrapped around him like heavy blankets, pressing him into a sweaty state of introspection. Ideas brimmed in his mind. Maybe there was a way to intertwine his skills in architecture with a passion for change, projects that could empower the vulnerable, buildings that could tell stories of resilience. He saw sketches in his mind of community spaces, shelters, open markets, places of connection and hope that could bridge gaps between cultures. This was a dream worthy of the sleepless nights, worthy of May's story. What if May could help him create something from scratch? A movement that could breathe life into their dreams? But was he ready to risk everything? The status, the expectations, and perhaps even the easy path laid before him? And what would be the price for such a transformative vision? An idea simmered, brimming with urgency. He needed to confront his firm, challenge the status quo, even if it meant standing toe-to-toe with colleagues who viewed compassion as a business liability. Haunted visions of the judgment May might face flashed in his mind, pushing him to realize that change was hard-earned, often met with resistance. As dawn broke, Jake made a decision that reverberated through every fiber of his being. He wouldn't only fight for the love blossoming with May, he would cultivate a movement aimed at change. He reached for his phone, the spark of ambition igniting his fingers on the screen. But as he opened a new message to his boss, a rush of doubt swelled within him. Had he truly thought this through? Jake hesitated, fingers hovering, poised to either forge a new destiny or click away, back into the mundane. In one fleeting moment, everything he hoped for and feared hung delicately in the balance. The direction of his life was now at the mercy of a singular decision. Would he take the plunge, or was he about to let his fears push him back into the shadows? Jake's heart raced as the light of dawn crept through his window, illuminating the dusty corners of his once static life. With a deep breath, he tried to focus. The inkling of momentum pushing him forward was almost tangible. He wasn't merely contemplating sending a message anymore. This was about redefining his life, about taking his first real steps into the vast unknown. Each key tap felt like a pulse in his resolve, yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Was he willing to risk everything he had built, the safe cocoon of corporate stability? He glanced at the sketches scattered across his desk, each one a mission statement for the dreams he had suppressed. There was a fire brewing inside him, a need to break free from the suffocating expectations around him, But the flickering shadows of doubt remained. Instead of sending the message, Jake set his phone down and grabbed a sketchpad. There was something liberating about physically creating. He could see the lines of his future emerging, shifting, evolving with every stroke of the pencil. As he conceived spaces where people could connect, share, and thrive, he imagined May's face lighting up with each new idea. The thought of collaborating with her ignited a spark that transcended fear. With determination bubbling in his gut, he envisioned an architectural design workshop infused with culture and compassion, a program aimed at empowering individuals from diverse backgrounds. He scribbled furiously, each idea morphing into the next, building upon itself like the structures he aspired to create. This, he realized, could be a radical shift, not just for himself, but for others who felt trapped in their own monotony. Hours slipped by as the sun rose higher in the sky, the world outside waking up around him while he lost himself in the creative current. He captured the essence of resilience, revising the very foundations of his ideals, sculpting not just edifices but experiences. The thrill of a potential legacy began to take root, but moments of clarity often come with a price, and dread crept back in. What would his colleagues think? Would they scoff at his newfound vision? The weight of their judgment bore down heavily, and a chilling reminder of ambivalence tugged at his thoughts. Was he prepared for the backlash that would undoubtedly follow? Jake slumped back in his chair, facing the hard truth. He wasn't just fighting a corporate mentality. He was waging war against his own fears. Doubtful whispers filled his mind, advising compliance and caution. Yet somewhere deep within him, something resolute whispered back. This was about more than just dreams. It was about who he was becoming. Compelled to act, he rose from his seat and paced the room, his steps echoing like a drum. In moments of tension, decisions crystallize. The notion of revealing his vision to the firm became less about seeking approval and more about claiming his narrative, a confrontation he needed to embrace. An idea took shape amidst the swirling chaos, a presentation to solicit feedback on his conceptual designs. He would approach it as a collaboration, a chance for creative dialogue rather than an indictment of their practices. It was time to invite them onto his turf without compromising his emerging identity. However, as he stood at the precipice of this newfound resolve, one thought lodged itself firmly in his mind. Was he capable of facing the inevitable resistance? Would the colleagues he once viewed as comrades see the light he was striving to embrace, or would they shatter his fragile aspirations? Jake grabbed his phone, staring at the screen once more. As he prepared to draft an email, he felt a surge of remembering their shared laughter, the moments with May that had kindled this very transformation. But as doubt writhed within him, he caught his breath, listening to the echo of his heart urging him forward. With a new determination coursing through him, he began typing. The words flowed, bold and vibrant, each one carrying the weight of his hopes. Yet, just as he reached the culminating sentence, a sharp knock at the door barked his focus back into a reality he was not yet fully prepared to face. The door swung open. In walked May, her presence illuminating the shadows of his indecision. But behind her eyes was a storm of uncertainty, the very reflection of Jake's fears. And in that charged moment of uncertainty, as their eyes met, Jake realized this encounter could redefine everything he thought he understood about courage, love, and the path ahead. Would her arrival propel his plans forward, or would it tear apart the fragile structure he was trying to build? Jake froze, the air in the room thick with tension. May stood there, her presence a paradox of familiarity and unpredictability, much like the turbulent thoughts swirling in his mind. He knew he had a choice to make, and time seemed to stretch as he gauged her expression. Would she merely reflect the doubts he had struggled to quell, or was she the catalyst he needed to embrace his vision? "Hey, I didn't mean to interrupt," May said, a tentative smile beginning to form on her lips. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. You look deep in thought." It's nothing," he replied, his voice betraying the chaos beneath. He was aware that his words sounded hollow, and he knew he had to be more forthcoming. Jake swallowed hard, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, airtime filled with suppressed nerves. May stepped closer, her gaze capturing his. "You can't hide this from me, Jake. There's something brewing inside you, I can see it." The warmth of her understanding seeped into his defenses. Each inch of space she closed felt like an invitation to share the visions he had penned that morning, the hopes and fears that pulsated within him. But what would he lose in the revelation? What if she saw his dreams as foolish? "I've been thinking about starting something new," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "A workshop, aimed at helping people in our community channel their creativity through architecture, a place for collaboration, compassion, and connection." May's eyes widened, igniting the spark of inspiration he had longed to witness. "That sounds incredible, but are you sure you're ready to take that leap? You could ruffle a lot of feathers at work." Her concern both stung and soothed him. It pressured him to confront the reality of his fears, yet the weight of her words also fortified his resolve. "That's exactly why I want to do it," he replied, his confidence gaining momentum. "I can't keep following a path dictated by others anymore. I need to carve my own." Her expression shifted, bewilderment mixing with admiration, and that was when Jake realized something profound. It wasn't just about organizational change. This was about him asserting his values and beliefs. A self-reflected authority emerging from years of complacency was pulsating to life. His mind raced ahead, envisioning the people the workshop could inspire, the lives he could transform. Yet with every inch of courage he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The looming specter of judgment from his colleagues clouded the bright daybreak of potential. The thought ignited a cold flame of fear, gnawing at the edges of his determination. What if they viewed him as naive? But wouldn't that risk be worth it if it meant aligning more closely with his true self? Mee stepped even closer, her voice softening yet fortifying. "Jake, you can't let fear paralyze what your heart is passionate about. This could be your moment to shine, to redefine not just your career but perhaps your legacy." The energy in the room shifted, amplifying the truth in her words. Jake sensed the moment slipping away, the chance to voice his ambitions and lose the chains that bound him to his past. But what if he faltered? What if he failed? He would not just be risking a job, but a reconfiguration of everything he had ever known. "What if it goes wrong?" he asked, voice trembling ever so slightly. "Then you learn," she replied, the conviction in her tone setting a new path ablaze within him. "Every innovation comes with missteps. It's the journey that defines us." The realization resonated, the weight of indecision loosening its grip. He felt a surge of clarity, bolstered by May's belief in him. This was indeed about courage, about revealing his true self to a world that had long cast shadows over his aspiration. Jake looked at May, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he saw a beacon of hope reflected in her gaze. A tidal wave of possibilities rushed through him, igniting the flame he had stoked for so long. With newfound resolve, he opened his mouth as if to articulate the full vision, but as he started, doubt re-emerged. Could he indeed embrace this path? His heart raced anew, and Jake realized that the battle was only just beginning. No longer burdened by uncertainty, he could feel the storm of resistance rising. The real answer to his question was yet to be revealed. With one last glance toward May, he straightened up, preparing himself for what lay ahead. Now more than ever, action beckoned, but as he steeled his spine, a thought flickered like a firefly in the night. What specific challenge could he pose to his colleagues that would bridge his emerging vision with their conventional beliefs? The next move became clear. It would test the very essence of his identity. The moment of truth was looming, and as they stood there, the path ahead twisted with complexity. Would their meeting bring clarity, or would it deepen the shadows he had fought so hard to escape? The anticipation tightened around him, and he steeled for the confrontation that would define the next chapter of his life. Jake took a deep breath, collecting the tangled threads of his resolve as he stepped away from the dim glow of the kitchen light. The implications of his conversation with May struck him like shards of glass, cleaving his thoughts into fragments of fear and hope. He could no longer ignore the fire igniting in him, demanding expression, exciting, yet terrifying. As he walked into the living room, The familiar architecture of his home felt constricting, mirroring his internal struggle. The walls, once a sanctuary, now closed in around him. With every step he took toward the small desk, cluttered with sketches and half-formed ideas, he could feel the weight of expectation bearing down. The expectations of his colleagues, his boss, but most importantly, of himself. Picking up a pencil, he hesitated, recalling the thrill of sketching his concepts. What was stopping him now? This was a time for action, not indecision. Jake's hands felt shaky as he began to draft an outline of the workshop, ideas flowing onto the page like water breaking through a dam. Every line he drew was laced with a pulse of daring. Coupled with May's encouragement, the words began forming a rhythm, a melody of authenticity rising from within. Yet beneath that rhythm lay a dissonance, an urge to retreat. How could he convince the others that this was not merely a flight of fancy? He envisioned himself presenting his ideas in the conference room, surrounded by faces hardened by years of indifference. The potential backlash stung, a gut reaction drawing him back to a world of conformity. He sought counsel from the shadows of his past, unable to silence the whisperings that he was merely an idealist, a label that had always plagued him. The echoes of judgment from colleagues flared up, igniting the familiar embers of self-doubt. Julia, a senior architect whose biting critiques were etched in his memory, flashed before him, and he hesitated. Would she dismiss his proposal, branding it unrealistic? Or worse, would she view him as a fool chasing a whimsical sunset? But then he recalled May's words, the essence of embracing missteps. It struck him. Perhaps this workshop could be a dialogue rather than a monologue. It didn't have to be about convincing his colleagues, but inviting them into a conversation. What if they saw the benefit in vulnerability? What if they realized that confronting their fears was as vital as sculpting a cityscape? Fueled by this revelation, Jake began drafting speaking points for an informal team meeting he now envisioned. Each word was steeped in authenticity, an invitation to explore possibility rather than a demand for acceptance. The idea of collaboration flickered in his mind, resonating with both the architect and the dreamer within him. This workshop could be a catalyst for creative mentorship, allowing emerging and seasoned architects alike to share their experiences and fears, and encourage innovation without the impediments of judgment. But as he scribbled, it dawned upon him that boldness was only half the battle. He needed to brace himself for the inevitable confrontations that awaited him. What if this idea of vulnerability was met with resistance? What if they became introspective but opposed sharing their fears in such an open way? Jake's heart thundered, recognizing that he stood at the edge of a precipice, either to leap into the unknown or retreat into safety. The tension thickened around him. The choice loomed larger than life. Could he bear the weight of potential rejection? Was he ready to question the same conventions he had adhered to for years? In that moment, a profound clarity washed over him. This challenge wasn't about convincing others to follow him. It was about embarking on his own journey of transformation. He would lay bare his own journey of fear and aspiration before them, fostering a space where vulnerability wasn't a weakness but a strength. As he prepared to finalize his thoughts, anticipation surged through his veins. The meeting was set for tomorrow, and uncertainty mingled with excitement in his gut. Jake had one chance to bridge his dreams with the conventional views of his colleagues. Now, with every outlining sketch on the paper, he faced another question: how to navigate the delicate balance between aspiration and the looming cynicism he sensed around him. The tension held its breath, waiting for his next move. Morning light spilled through the window, illuminating the sketches strewn across Jake's desk like scattered dreams waiting for connection. Each sketch told a story, whispered a possibility. But today, those stories stood in stark contrast to the internal tempest swirling within him. As he prepared for the meeting, he could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, not only from his colleagues, but an unbearable burden of self-imposed fear and hesitation. He paced the room, his mind a battlefield of doubts. What if they deemed his ideas frivolous? What if the haunting echoes of Julia's criticism resurfaced, throwing him back into the depths of self-doubt? Yet the thought of retreating filled him with a sense of urgency. This couldn't be a moment of stillness. It was about transformation, not only for him, but for all the architects who felt stifled by convention. Jake's fingers brushed against the sketches, a tactile reminder of why he embarked on this journey. They illustrated more than architecture. They embodied vision, a vision that deserved to breathe, to be shared. Through the haze of uncertainty, he recalled May's laughter, her unwavering belief in such raw openness. The memories sparked a flame, igniting a determination within him. He realized that this was his moment to galvanize that spark into a flame of collective introspection. He drew in a breath, steadying himself as he recalled the manner in which he would frame the conversation. It wouldn't be a lecture, it would be an exploration fueled by curiosity. He envisioned inviting each team member to share what they viewed as barriers in their design process, what fears kept them from innovating fearlessly. But would they embrace the personal exploration he hoped to foster? The faces of his colleagues loomed in his mind, comfort-seeking. They might resist the forward motion, heralded by vulnerability. The tension tightened in his chest. He felt just on the brink of clarity, yet the nagging doubt clawed at him. What if they simply weren't ready? Deciding to anchor himself deeper in purpose, he grazed the pencil over the page, sketching the outlines of the meeting. A dialogue, he reminded himself. Allow room for dissent. The thought of his colleagues becoming animated with frustrations and thoughts made his heart race. What a change from the routine of rigid presentations that were met with obligatory nods of compliance. Each idea sketched on the paper became a manifestation of his desire to disrupt the mold. As he developed his speaking points, images of their past projects emerged in his mind. The sterile conference meetings filled with indifference. He aimed to break that cycle. The thought of creating an environment that instigated creativity and risk made his pulse quicken. He was not merely pushing against systemic barriers of thought, he was dismantling them. Suddenly, a chilling realization washed over him. What if their resistance wasn't merely a product of their indifference but was instead rooted in fear, the fear of exposing their vulnerabilities? Wouldn't that be a confession worthy of a meeting itself? This line of inquiry shook him. Now more than ever, he felt the urgency of his task. Jake had entered the realm of personal growth. What kind of leader was he willing to be today? As he began refining his approach, he pondered the central question, not whether he could lead, but would he invite others to journey with him? The clock ticked in rhythmic resonation with his pulse as he moved towards the door. With every step, the weight of possibility challenged him fiercely. Jake took one last look at his sketches, a mix of exhilaration and dread coursing through him. This meeting was merely hours away. The moment had arrived to confront his fears, not only for his colleagues but for himself. Would he be brave enough to stand vulnerable, inviting criticism and conversation? As he exited his home into the bustling world beyond, another thought crystallized. How could this moment reshape his identity as both an architect and a leader? The stakes were rising, and Jake was caught in the throes of uncertainty, determined to forge ahead yet grappling with an impending reckoning. Outside the city loomed large, magnificent yet punishing, and the impending confrontation loomed closer. Would he falter or claim his voice? The meeting spelled a turning point, not merely for a workshop, but for his entire career. The conference room buzzed with casual conversations, laughter punctuating the air as Jake stepped inside. The familiarity of the space, once a sanctum for sterile presentations, now felt charged, as though it anticipated the shift he intended to ignite. He placed his sketches, neatly gathered, on the table, dominating the center of the sterile space with their vibrant ethos. Yet even as he settled in, an unsettling thoughts twisted his stomach. The energy crackling in the room beckoned courage, but the collective expectation felt heavy, like weights tethered to his ankles. How would he actualize the vision he had? Would they perceive his invitation for vulnerability as an affront or an opportunity? The thought sent his mind spiraling back to Julia's critique about ambition, masquerading as naivety. In an attempt to grab hold of the momentum, Jake began the meeting with a deep breath, the kind that filled not just his lungs but seemed to expand into the space around him. He opened with an acknowledgement of the creative stagnation they had fallen prey to, a recognition that seemed to breathe life into the room. A ripple of nods met his admission, and a hesitant sense of relief washed over him. Perhaps there was hope. "Today," he said, letting his voice be guided by vision rather than fear, "I want us to explore the barriers we confront when innovating. Let's dismantle our perceptions of what is acceptable." It was an audacious statement. Yet, it was also liberating. Immediately, the air crackled with palpable skepticism and intrigue. "Do you really think we can change how we approach design?" Mark, an old colleague steeped in their established ways, shot back. His question was assertive, but beneath the surface, Jake detected an urge for something more, maybe even a desire to break free. "That's exactly what I hope we can unpack today," he replied with unwavering conviction. "Our old framework may serve us well, but has it stifled our growth?" The challenge hung in the air, enticing yet daunting, prompting murmurs among the team. As the dialogue deepened, it became apparent that Jake's instincts had been correct. Their hesitations were not just about the designs they presented, but also about their vulnerabilities. Personal confessions emerged, each shared fear unveiling deeper layers of resistance, the fear of inadequacy, of disappointing their peers, and ultimately, of being exposed. Jake listened intently as they articulated their struggles. Each story resonated within him, echoing his own wariness. He felt an unexpected bond forming with his colleagues. Layers of professional distance peeled away to reveal a shared human experience. Each revelation pushed a piece of the creative lock deeper into place. He seized the moment, deftly redirecting their revelations back to the sketches laid on the table. "What if," he proposed, "we channel this vulnerability? Let's integrate these authentic pieces of ourselves into our designs. Shouldn't our architecture reflect the very essence of who we are?" As he spoke, a wave of fortitude surged through him, illuminating a newfound strength in his voice that he hadn't known was possible. The dialogue began to flourish, moving from hesitant participation to eager involvement. Different ideas sparking off one another, the fear dissipating into possibility. The meeting spiraled into a dynamic exploration of concepts. Sketches transformed in real time from mere drawings to embodiments of the very psyche of the creators. Jake stood at the helm, not as a leader dictating terms, but as a guide facilitating an odyssey, paving a pathway where the intersection of vulnerability and creativity could yield groundbreaking outcomes. As the discussions faded into a new chapter of their collaborative potential, Jake sensed a transformative moment. He was not merely leading them, he was unveiling a dimension of himself as a facilitator. But just as he began to revel in this clarity, a thought crept in. Had he truly faced his greatest fear, or had he merely brushed the surface? The clock chimed its dissonant reminder, splitting the air. The meeting concluded, but an urge surged within him. There was more to confront, more depths to explore. Jake exited the room, excitement and apprehension dancing in a delicate ballet within him. What awaited him beyond this revelation and the work left uncharted? He looked down at his sketches, his eyes lingering on a design that felt intuitively personal and hauntingly profound. The next step beckoned. It loomed as both promise and precipice. Would he dare to dive deeper into his own vulnerabilities, transcending what he dared to share? What uncharted territories lay ahead now that the past had been illuminated? As Jake left the bustling conference room, the energy pulsing within him began to crystallize into a resolute determination. The shadows of doubt still lingered, but they were diminished, eclipsed by the illumination of newfound purpose. He slipped down the corridor, sketchbook tucked under his arm, each step echoing with the possibilities born from vulnerability. The sketches felt alive, vibrant reflections of not just their designs but his identity, a daring articulation he had hesitated to claim until now. In the solitude of his office, Jake placed the sketches on his desk and allowed himself a moment of introspection. Was he truly ready to reveal the raw edges of his psyche? The sketches represented more than designs. They were a palette of his fears, ambitions, and unspoken truths. Flashes from the meeting returned to him. How his colleagues had opened their hearts, peeled back layers of insecurity like the pages of a book. If creativity thrived in authenticity, then perhaps this was the key to his own development. Instead of shying away from the challenging questions, Jake leaned into them. He opened his sketchbook to the design that rooted itself in his thoughts. As he studied it, his mind wandered. What if he took it further, making it an exploration of his personal narrative? The design could encapsulate his journey, his moments of trial, his struggles with self-worth, and the crescendos of ambition that propelled him forward. Suddenly he could see shape, texture, and light animating the spaces he had only brushed upon. In quiet resolve, Jake began to sketch with fervor. Lines danced across the page as he infused each stroke with emotional clarity. The design grew into an intricate arrangement reflecting not merely architectural sensibilities, but also a story woven from his experiences. He sketched in the isolation he had felt in his early career, the highs of breakthrough when he learned to voice his ideas, and the chaotic noise of self-doubt that still whispered beneath his composure. Each iteration of the design felt like an act of catharsis, but as he delved deeper, he questioned the heavier elements of his past. He grappled with the notion of how often he had abandoned his voice to appease others, collapsing under the weight of expectation. The design was inviting him to relinquish the safety nets tethering him to complacency. Doing so felt terrifying, yet exhilarating. The tension strummed through him like a string pulled taut, awaiting the release of a powerful note. Yet as Jake pushed forward, a nagging fear arose, the specter of judgment clouding his creative clarity. What if his vulnerability wasn't received as the strength he yearned to exude? What if it was perceived as a sign of weakness? The thought paralyzed him momentarily, halting the flow of ink to paper. He closed his eyes, letting the noise of critique fade, focusing instead on the conviction that had ignited in the conference room. His thoughts turned to his colleagues, their genuine expressions of fear and longing. Could he risk the potential fallout if he chose to bear it all, just as they had? The urge to cultivate a culture of open dialogue, where each member felt seen and valued, propelled him onward. If they could engage in this journey together, why shouldn't he step forward first? With renewed determination, Jake unleashed his pen onto the page once more, this time with unwavering confidence. He committed not only to the artistic expression, but to embodying the essential integration of vulnerability within his workspace, finally embracing the very parts he had hidden for so long. The sketch transformed into a mirror, reflecting his evolution, all while demanding that he confront what lay beneath the surface. Just as his pen was guided by instinct, the door to his office swung open. Startled, he turned to find Mark standing in the entryway, his brow furrowed. The skepticism that had previously marked their exchanges was gone, replaced by a curious mixture of admiration and concern. "What have you been working on?" Mark asked, stepping closer, his tone unexpectedly softening. Jake's heart raced. This wasn't just about how he conveyed his ideas, it was a test of what it meant to be seen. As he hesitated on the precipice of revealing his transformation, the weight of the moment bore down on him. Would he allow his truth to emerge, even now? The room felt charged with potential, and all he had to do was take a step forward. "Let me show you," Jake finally said, his voice steady, ready to unveil the depth of his journey. But the question loomed, would Mark embrace this new chapter, or would it lead to backlash and doubt? The very pulse of his future awaited the response. Jake took a breath, his mind racing with the weight of impending vulnerability. He had spent years designing architecture that conformed to bland expectations, avoiding confrontation with his own unarticulated struggles. Now, standing before Mark, poised to share the heartbeat of his creative journey, he felt the gravity of fate pressing upon him. As he pulled the sketches closer, he noticed the contours of his design subtly shifting under Mark's cautious gaze. Uncertainty rippled within him. What if Mark dismissed his work as self-indulgent or trivial? Would his words, the manifestation of his very essence, be treated with disdain? Jake's heart thudded in his chest, each beat an echo of all his previous rejections, both external and internal. "Here," he said, extending the pages. The ink felt like a living entity, echoing the tumult of his internal landscape, blurring the lines between art and confession. Mark's eyes scanned the intricate designs, first with curiosity, then with a dawning comprehension. "I see. You're telling your story through architecture," Mark said, a hint of astonishment coloring his voice. "Yes," Jake answered, emboldened by the initial spark of recognition. "I want this to reflect not only my technical skills but also my journey as an individual. It's about embracing the fear and the triumphs, allowing vulnerability to drive creativity." Mark nodded, his expression contemplative. "Vulnerability resonates, but it also opens you up to critique." A shadow passed over his face. "Are you prepared for that?" Jake braced himself. "No, not fully. But I'm ready to try. What I've realized is that authentic creativity thrives on honesty. Without it, I can't grow." Mark seemed to ponder the sincerity in Jake's eyes. The tension hung, slowly shifting as a silent understanding grew between them. "This is bold, Jake, I admire that. But do you really think it reflects the architectural demands of our clients?" The words felt like a punch, conjuring the very fear he had battled. Was he ready to stand in this duality, the creative artist and the pragmatic architect? "I believe it's possible to blend them, to create designs that not only fulfill client expectations but also carry emotional weight," he argued, urgency coursing through his voice. Mark considered this, his features softening. "You may be onto something, but remember to account for practicality. Too much vulnerability might alienate." "It could also inspire," Jake interjected, discovering the confidence growing inside him. "It's a risk, but it could redefine not just my work but how we function as a team. We're in a creative space after all. If I can't be authentic in my designs, how can I expect anyone else to be?" Mark met his gaze, and for a moment a flicker of understanding passed between them. "So, you're suggesting that by sharing our vulnerabilities, we can foster a more innovative culture? To encourage risk-taking?" "Yes, that's exactly it. If we are all just going through the motions, we might miss out on groundbreaking ideas." The fervor of his beliefs poured from him, every word solidifying the path forward he envisioned. As silence enveloped them, the weight of Jake's proposition settled within the walls of the office. What was once a space of doubt now resonated with the possibility of change. Mark finally spoke, his voice steadier. "Then let's take this to the team. It's time for a new approach." Jake nearly laughed, relief flooding through him. The anticipation of their collaboration rippled with excitement. Here, with Mark's backing, he could truly explore this uncharted territory, an entire realm of creativity waiting to blossom into the light of authenticity. But as he pondered the outcome of that revelation, Jake also felt an undercurrent of anxiety. Would the rest of the team embrace this ethos of openness? He had laid the first brick in a new foundation, but the next steps were still shrouded in uncertainty. Just as the air crackled with potential, Mark added, "But remember, Jake, this will require you to be even more open than before. Prepare for that kind of scrutiny." Jake nodded, the gravity of the promise settling in his chest. His journey had only just begun, and ahead lay the tumultuous road to transformation. Would he be able to navigate the complexities it would bring, not just for himself, but for those around him? The door swung open as they stepped into the unknown, both men committed to a dialogue that could forever alter the course of their careers. As Jake's heart quickened with anticipation, he realized that he still had plenty of inner demons to confront. The real question loomed. Could he continue to unearth his truth with the same fervor when the stakes were raised? The moment of confrontation was near, and it would demand more than he had yet given. As Jake braced himself to unfold his vision to the entire team, a powerful sense of purpose surged within him. He stood at the threshold of a new beginning, aware that it was not merely about architecture but an excavation of authenticity, vulnerability, and courage. This journey, once a solitary march through chaos, was poised to become a vibrant tapestry woven from the shared human experience of his colleagues. The day of the all-hands meeting arrived, and Jake entered the conference room, his palms slightly damp with excitement and nerves. It was here that he planned to unveil not just his workshop proposal, but also the transformative process he had undergone. He took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation, and began, "Thank you all for being here. Jake started, deliberately letting his voice resonate through the space. Today I want to talk about something more than numbers or compliance. It's about our creative vitality. I believe that through vulnerability, we can fuel our innovation. A sea of skeptical eyes shifted toward him, yet under the surface he sensed a flickering curiosity. We've become so focused on professionalism and client satisfaction that we've stifled what makes us individuals, our stories, our passions. I propose we create a workshop where we can explore this together. Initial murmurs of dissent rippled through the room. A workshop on vulnerability? Isn't that just fluff? Julia's voice cut through the atmosphere like a blade. Jake's heart sank for a moment, but he knew this was the kind of scrutiny he had to face. Instead of retreating, he leaned into it. Julia, he replied, a surprising steadiness anchoring his words. It's not fluff. It's the very foundation of what drives creativity. If we can expose our insecurities, we can shift how we collaborate. We often critique the designs we create, but what if we turned that critical eye inward first? The room quieted, the tension palpable. As Jake continued, he saw the walls of skepticism begin to soften. He recalled the connections forged in the prior meeting and invoked that momentum. Imagine a space where our sketches come to life, reflective of who we are. We could design architecture that embodies emotional resonance, what is meaningful to us. It's time to reshape how we view creativity, not as a commodity, but as a heartfelt endeavor. A few heads nodded. Mark, seated toward the back, leaned forward, intrigued. And how exactly would this workshop work? What would participants gain from it? Jake seized the question as an opportunity to expand upon his vision. There would be activities, sharing sessions that encourage everyone to reveal their narratives. We would bridge our stories with our architectural designs, allowing our projects to reflect not just function, but our individuality and shared humanity. As Jake elaborated, his confidence swelled, buoyed by the visible change in expressions around the room. He spoke of future projects that could incorporate elements derived from personal experiences, literature, and emotions. A radical departure from sterile design principles. Imagine, Jake continued, a community center built not only to serve but to tell the story of its residents. A shelter that weaves dignity into its walls, shaped by those who know struggle. We can create spaces that breathe life and connection. The room shifted from skepticism to genuine contemplation, and a new energy enveloped them. Questions flowed in response, a cascade of interest replacing initial resistance. They were curious, perhaps even enticed, by the thought of intertwining vulnerability with creativity. Jake stood firm at the center of it all, guiding the dialogue with palpable passion. By the end of the session, Jake felt a profound transformation wasn't just occurring within him but collectively among his colleagues. They discussed their barriers, swapped ideas, and for the first time, the room resonated with earnestness. He had successfully invited them into a brave new space, crafting a bridge that connected hope with creativity. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake felt a wave of accomplishment wash over him. He had faced his fears and articulated not only his vision, but ignited a collective exploration of vulnerability. There was a shift in the air, a sense that they were embarking on a journey of transformation together, with shared goals reflecting their authentic selves. As Jake walked out of the conference room, the resonance of their dialogue still echoed in his mind. The meeting had been not only a professional milestone, but a personal victory, one that cemented his resilience and growth. He had stood at the intersection of vulnerability and leadership, asserting his space in a world where the interplay of passion and professionalism had often been muted. Now Jake looked at the skyline outside, visualizing buildings that could inspire, grow, and strengthen communities. With the workshop taking shape, he felt a solid confidence blooming within him, realizing that his journey was not solely about architecture, but also about embracing the entirety of human experience. His connection with May had awakened this transformation, but it was his willingness to embrace vulnerability that had truly set him free. In this empowered state, Jake not only conquered his fears, but established himself as a catalyst of change, reaffirming that personal growth often lays the groundwork for inspiring collective creativity. This was not the end. It was just the beginning, a testament to embracing authenticity. If you resonate with Jake's journey, you need to subscribe now to our channel, as we continue to share exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread this inspiring narrative. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, and comment your reactions and theories about what lies ahead. Your support fuels these powerful stories. Be part of the movement today.